conference. Triton sunrise, room Yug Sadu. Serena sat on a comfortable chair beside me. Together, we watched the image of the sunrise as it was projected on the wall of the room. I was wearing my favorite sash, the one my wife had given to me, just before I left Fazarit to go to Earth for the first time. Serena, of course, was in her cold suit, with a Fazarit sash slung across from shoulder to hip. To it were attached the decorations awarded her by the Council of Ministers for everything she'd done for us. They'd been anxious to present the sash to her, but hesitant about cutting into her busy schedule, so I'd mentioned it and left the decision up to her. To her credit, she'd ruthlessly carved out a time slot that allowed us to visit Fazarit and show up in person for the award ceremony. I knew her well enough to be aware that she wasn't a glory hog, or was the saying glory count. English had weird phrasings. But she was fully aware that showing up to accept would mean the world to us. She'd never be able to wear it on Earth, as the materials it was composed of, durable enough on Fazarit, would vaporize, melt, or combust if exposed to Earth-like conditions. So she stored it on Triton and attached it to her cold suit whenever she visited. "Did you hear about the explosion in Lab 37? She asked idly as the upper limb of the sun crested the horizon, refracting sprays of color from the occasional outcrop of water ice in between. I did. I flicked one of my tentacles in anticipation of sharing some tasty gossip. It was a fairly volatile experiment, so they were all running telepresence robots. I'm not even sure that anyone did anything wrong. When we're hybridizing our tech with yours, the results can be energetic." Serena chuckled. "Energetic is one word for it. I'm told the crater is particularly impressive. Did they get any useful results?" "Yeah, I twisted my two left tentacles together to show amusement. They learned not to do that specific thing without additional shielding." Ralatzing of additional shielding. Apparently, the device they were working on objected to having an unshielded radioactive element inserted into it. Violently. Yeesh. To be fair, so would I. I'm guessing that's going to be a red zone on the map until they're sure they've collected all the debris, especially the stuff that makes you guys explode. My shudder was unfeigned. Your guess is correct. You humans and your preoccupation with the forbidden materials. She smirked. We can't help it if we grew up with radiation. It's natural to us. Without a certain amount of it, we get sick. Hell, some of the potassium in bananas is radioactive. I waved my tentacles to emulate an eye roll. That doesn't surprise me in the slightest, you fire-blooded hell demon, says the cross between a giant squid and a snow cone, she shot. I made a rude noise. That's the octopus and snow cone, you walking apocalypse event. I'd seen an octopus at an aquarium on one of my tours of Earth, and I wasn't sure which of us had been more fascinated with the other. Before she could think of something to top that, my calm chimed. I held up one tentacle while I retrieved it. "Saduk, you have an incoming call, sir. Request for a conference by the equal above all of Tanarak." I twisted my tentacles together in surprise and speculation, then looked at Serena. through her faceplate. I could see her eyebrows were raised for much the same reason. Any objections to having Lieutenant Commander Hernandez sit in? They'd have to be extremely valid ones. I'd be filling her in about the call afterward anyway. There was a brief pause. Gay doesn't sound happy, but he says not. Tanarak never sounded happy at the best of times, but that was just the way they were. If they wanted to growl at everything all the time, I wasn't going to judge. And since they were keeping to the terms of the agreement we'd hammered out under the eye of the discreet, but extremely thither human peacekeepers, I was happy to see what he wanted. Okay, we'll take the call in my office. I copy that, sir. Ping me when you're ready. Absolutely. I ended the call and glanced at Serena. Are you as curious as I am? She bounced to her feet, but carefully. Even with the added mass of the cold suit, she still didn't weigh anywhere near what she did on Earth, and nodded. Considering that he didn't spend 3 weeks going through diplomatic channels to work his way up to this, definite. That the call had nothing to do with any problems on Earth with Thwicka or Pograk. I was certain the comm center had standing orders to alert the both of us. Wherever we might be, or whatever we might be doing, if anything like that arose. Furthermore, there was always a ship standing ready on the pad, for the express purpose of getting us there sooner rather than later in the case of a sudden crisis. None of this had come up, which meant the equal above all was concerned about something youthly than a mishap befalling his occasionally quirky offspring. We left the sunrise room and went to the collection of rooms that had been put aside for my use. In pride of place was a large image of Thwicka, carefully tending her garden. The glorious colors of the flowers brightening the whole room. I'd sent a copy of it home, where it shared wall space with the picture of a younger Serena blowing soap bubbles. In return, I happened to know, Serena had one of my entire family up on the wall back on Earth. Once we were set up in my office, both of us in front of the large comm screen, and in view of the camera, I pinged the comm center with my acknowledgement to put the call through. The screen activated, then flickered a few times as the FTL call bounced through the various nodes from Tanarak space. When it cleared, we were looking at the equal above all. Greetings, he said in his usual abrupt way. However, when he spoke again, his words were slower, as though he was having to think carefully about their content. Not a situation he normally found himself in, I suspected. Kai, appreciate your timely acceptance of my communication. I restrained a tentacle twitch of surprise, at the same time as Serena's eyebrows flicked upward, and then back down, almost too fast to spot. The Tanarak version of diplomacy usually involved not threatening the other party, actually thanking us for not stringing him along for a week or two. Was the equivalent of falling to his knee. They didn't work quite the same as human knees, but close enough, and kissing my locomotion tentacles with the lips he didn't possess, which meant that Serena and I had been correct in our surmise that shit had to be going sideways. I absolutely loved some Earth idioms. At translate speeds for him to make this call. You're totally welcome, I replied, without any sarcasm at all. By now, I was thoroughly invested in finding out exactly what was going on. Whatever it was, it promised to be a by doozy. So, what's the problem? Is Pograk being teased? Or something? It was the only thing I could think of that wouldn't have been already reported to us. At the same time, I couldn't imagine the stiff-necked, another gorgeous idiot. Young Tanarak complaining to his progenitor about something so minor. Besides, I was pretty sure they didn't want Thwicka to yell at them, twice, about it. No. Per his latest communication, he is interacting well with the young humans in the school and your own offspring. But that is what I wish to speak to you about. I shared a glance with Serena. She shrugged, evidently as clueless about what he was leading up to as I was. Looking back at the screen, I spread my tentacles to invite a reply. And that is exactly what? The equal above all leaned forward, his voice lowering slightly, as though to exclude casual listeners. Pograk sent a communication to me, uninvited, containing simply happenings, occurrences, no matters of vital importance. I seek to understand why he did this. Oh, that, I said. Thwicka did the same thing. It was nice. I sent a copy on to her mother. Minus the bits about soccer and swimming and shooting guns, of course. I wasn't an idiot. I'm not sure I see what the problem is. Serena cleared her throat to get our attention. I think I do. Once his attention swung to her. I am listening. I was so pleased I was recording this, because nobody would believe it otherwise. The equal above all was usually curt with, well, everyone, but to straight up tell a human that Eddie was listening to her for advice, when normally he would have spent half an hour or more hinting maybe, if she had something to say, he might think about being receptive to her ideas. Wow. Just wow. This guy was desperate. Sitting forward in her chair, Serena began to talk. If you ever felt like doing a deep dive into human history, you'd find out that we've had a lot of cultures. Some are more like the Bubblers, while a few shared some aspects with the Tanarak. For us, here now, a kid sending a letter home to his parents from boarding school is perfectly normal. The practice started when letters were literally written on paper and would take days or even weeks to get to their destination. But it's continued to the present. Bubblers are a lot like we are now. So either she came up with the idea herself, or someone suggested it, and she took it. Are you following me so far? I am. The equal above all spoke those two words, then waited. Serena nodded. So, the other side of the coin. Some of our cultures were grim and brutal. To be fair, they generally came about during grim, brutal parts of our history. But there were times when children were sent to learn and weren't expected, or in some cases, even allowed, to communicate with home. A human from that time would understand your confusion totally. But we're not from that time, and Pograk has been immersed in a culture alien to his in more ways than one, ever since he got. Did he say why he wrote the letter to you? Yes. He seeks to understand humans. Better. But what I do not comprehend is how he intends to do that by sending me such a banal communication. My concern is about his mental stability. T-Rain. Serena nodded. And that's exactly what the parent of one of those kids during the brutal times would think too. But Pograk is attending school in our time. He's been absorbing knowledge of human culture, whether he knows it or not. If he hadn't been, it would never have occurred to him to send you the letter. Trust me, he's perfectly sane. He's just learning new ways. I have to agree with her, I interject. The concept of sending a communication home from school never really became a thing on Faziri, because we keep our young close and safe. But once she sent it to me, I understood it immediately. Tell me, did the tone of this letter still sound like Pograk? Or did he advocate strange new ideas? Now the equal above all swung his attention back to me. Apart from the very act of transmitting the communication, which he admitted to not really understanding the need for. No, Doa. All else he spoke about was, as I know of him. He seemed to relax as he said this, as though his own words were reassuring him. But what of it? The communication is virtually meaningless. Nothing of true significance is mentioned. You're wrong, Serena stated boldly. The significance is right there, but you're missing it. He's sending you a message talking about his experiences, because they're important to him, and he wants to share that with you. He's reaching out to you as a son to a father. You're the most important person in his life, as signified by the fact that he sent it to you. The expression on the equal above all's muzzle was not dissimilar to the one that his predecessor had worn all those years ago, when Serena had poured water over her head to intimidate. He seemed to be grasping the concept, but was unable to carry it through to its conclusion. What am I supposed to do? I have no mundane experiences to communicate in return. Kay, is his mother in the picture? Serena asked. His female life-bearer is still extant, yes. Yes. Why? Serena shrugged. You're obviously very busy. Pass the letter on to her. She can reply, telling him about her day and the things she's doing. She'll probably be pleased to hear he's doing well. She paused, holding a finger up. Whatever you do, don't fob it off to an official to answer in your place or hers. This needs the personal touch. And it'll help you to maintain connection with your kid while he's far off in a dangerous place, which will be good for all of you. Yo, DC. Ooh, he seemed to be thinking about it. I can do that. I will do that. Huh? He looked from Serena to me and back again. I appreciate the insights. They have been thought-provoking. With that, the screen went dark. I looked at Serena and chuckled. Congratulations. What for? She asked. It was just common sense. I know. I was still chuckling. But you just got to lay down the law to a Tanarak, and he thanked you for it. That's got to be the politest even that guy has ever been to me. She grinned. It's a changing galaxy. It was, well, May I speak with you? I looked around from watering my garden, pouring molten lava over living things that could stand far higher temperatures than I ever would, to see Pograk standing there. Through his mostly transparent helmet, I could see an odd expression on his muzzle. While we had spoken from time to time after he took up studies with the college, this was the first time he'd approached me, which raised my curiosity. "Sure," I said, and put the watering can down. I about finished watering the plants anyway. "What's on your mind, my cryo buddy?" His expression briefly changed to one that suggested he'd somehow found a cryobiological analog to a lemon and bitten into it. I promptly committed the nickname to memory. That was the funniest expression I'd ever seen on his face. But he didn't snap at me or leave. "I have recently received a communication from Tanarak," he said. "It was composed by my female life-bearer, on instructions from my progenitor, the equal above all. I know this because she said so. It consisted mainly of a few anecdotes of life in the capital." I gestured agreement with my tentacles. "Yeah, I got one myself. I'd actually gotten two, one from Mom and one from Dad, but right now was not the time to sound like I was trying to one-up. It was really nice to hear from Mom." I paused, then asked the obvious question. "How did your letter make you feel?" For a moment, I thought he wasn't going to answer, but then he did anyway. "It reminded me of Tanarak. Of home." "Me too," I said. "Well, mine reminded me of Fazirik, but same thing. It's nice to know that our parents are thinking about us, isn't it?" He hesitated. "I have never had reason to consider whether something is nice before. The concept is foreign to me. But to consider that the equal above all, my progenitor, sees me as his child, as well as his heir, is a new feeling as well." I put my tentacle on his shoulder. He didn't shake it off. "Just think about this. You're here on Earth learning whole new ways to look at the world. And he's back home on Tanarak, doing exactly the same thing. Unless you're gonna tell me that he'd planned for this whole alliance deal from the beginning." When he spoke, his voice was subdued. I had not thought about it like that. "You are correct. There is no guide to show him how best to reform Tanarak society in the wake of our change." I laughed. Just a little. He looked at me, an expression of betrayal clear on his muzzle. Before he could speak, I twisted my tentacles in a gesture of negation. "I wasn't laughing at you or your dad. But I thought of something you can do for him." "Oh?" he asked, looking puzzled. "What? Why?" My own expression could best be described by the human phrase, beatific smile. If there's even a high-potential form of government, humans have written books about. I bet if you went to the library and did a bit of research, you could find something similar to what your dad's working on, and send it to it. Might give him some insights. His head came up. "I could do that," he agreed. "If there is anything the Wargaming Club has taught me, it is that humans will try literally everything before settling on the most efficient course of action." I stared at him, impressed. "Pograk, did you just make a joke? About all humans?" His expression told me nothing. I didn't know what a Tanarak smile looked like, because I'd never seen one. Perhaps, he said, then turned and walked away. It wasn't easy, but I waited until he was out of sight before performing my best attempt at a fist pump. Yes! Pograx developed a sense of humor. I couldn't wait to tell Dad and Serena. Who's sedukes, he burns. I held out the tablet to Serena. Have you read this letter from Thwicca? She took it and scanned it through. Huh. No, I hadn't. That's so sweet. I wonder if he even notices how his behavior is changing. I have no idea, I mused. Tanarak aren't big on self-reflection. Or at least, no Tanarak I've ever met has been. True, she agreed. But I figure it's a nature versus nurture thing. We're changing their nurture, so their nature is gradually altering. I'd heard about this thing before, of course, but it was the first time it had truly made sense to me. So, you think Pograk might actually grow up to be a nice guy? She grinned. Sure. He'll never not be abrasive, but if anyone's got a chance to get there with Thwicca as a role model, it's him. Huh, I said. I liked that. My little Thwicca, changer of worlds. Damn straight.